Hello, boys and girls. Today we're going to read a story that's a little bit different than we have in the past. It's about some children that are a little different than you and I possibly. Some have a disease, some have a learning disability, can't see the words quite like you and I do, and sometimes they just have a problem. And so we have to be respectful to those, even if they're different than us. That's okay, because God created us all the same, didn't He? And also, she lives partly with her mom and partly with her dad. So we need to be thankful if we have two parents that we can live in the same house. Well, she spent the summer with her dad, but she has to go back to her mom for school. But as we start reading, we'll see what happens with her decision to stay with her dad. So the story is called The Junkyard Wonders, and you might wonder why it has a funny name, but you'll discover what it means once we've read the story. It was the end of summer. The crickets were still buzzing when I finally summoned up the courage to ask my dad if I could stay with him and Grandma for the school year, instead of going back to California to be with my mom like always. Your mom would miss you, Tricia, but I will talk to her, Dad said. I had a reason for staying, a good reason. My heart sang as I walked to school with all the kids at on my grandma's block at the first day of school. My mother and father had decided I could stay just for 1 year there with my father and Grandma in Michigan. In my old school in California, the kids all knew that I had just learned to read, that I used to be dumb. And see, that was her reason for wanting to go to a different school, because the kids at the school where she was before didn't treat her very well. Everyone knew that I was always in a special class. No one would know. No one would tease me, and I already had a new friend, Kay. But when I got to the front steps of the school, all of the neighborhood kids ran off to their classes. And when I saw Kay and waved to her, she didn't wave back. I just stood there not knowing where to go. And when I showed two strange girls my class card, they gave me funny looks. "You're in Mrs. Peterson's class," they said. "Upstairs, room 206. Room 206. I found it. In the classroom, a gawky boy I'd never seen before yelled out, "Hey, my name's Tom, not spelled T-O-M, but T-H-O-M. Sit here next to me." He had huge dark-rimmed glasses that magnified his eyes. I sat down and looked around. Everyone seemed really different in one way or another. I couldn't put my finger on it. Suddenly, everyone snapped to attention. Our teacher was standing in the doorway. Short and stout, she seemed a little scary, brisk, but her eyes were friendly. I was sure of that. She walked up to the podium at the front of the room and slammed an enormous dictionary on top of it. Then she adjusted her glasses, and without saying hello or how are you, she started reading in this no-nonsense voice. "The definition of genius," she began. "Genius is neither learned nor acquired. It is knowing without experience. It is risking without fear of failure. It is perception without touch. It is understanding without research. It is certainty without proof. It is ability without practice. It is invention without limitations. It's imagination without boundaries. It is creativity without constraints. And it is extraordinarily intelligence." Then she took a deep breath and slammed the book shut so hard it sounded like a gunshot. "Welcome to the junkyard. I am your teacher, Mrs. Peterson." She started walking around the room looking at each of us. "I want you all to write the definition on the blackboard, post it on your mirrors, look at it every day, memorize it. The definition describes every one of you." At recess that day, I couldn't wait to ask Tom, "Why is our class called the Junkyard?" "Because we are. Didn't you notice? All of us are different. odd, like stuff in a junkyard. He turned towards the playground. See that super tall kid over there? That's Jody Beach. He's got some disease that makes him grow too fast. He's my bodyguard. No one picks on me when he's around. He smiled. Over there, that kid, that's Gibby McDonald. He has Tourette's. That's Stuart Bean. He has diabetes. Me, well, I have trouble seeing. They call me Sissy Boy because even so, I love ballet. It's my life. So just to explain, Tourette's disease is a disease that kids don't have control of their emotions. Sometimes they jiggle and their arms move when they don't have control of it. So that was a special disease that boy had. I take ballet too. At least I did in California. I know there was something about you I liked, Tom said. I felt I had found a soulmate in Tom, and since he thought Jody was nifty, so did I. But it only helped a little. When I got home that night, I told Dad and Grandma about my day. I tried to be brave and not let them know how sad I really was. But just as Dad was tucking me into my bed, I finally burst into tears. Oh, Daddy, I've been put in a special class again. It's called the Junkyard. Junkyard? What junkyard? My dad asked. That's what everyone calls our class. Darling, said my dad, you are not a quitter. Stick it out for a month. If the class doesn't get better, I promise I'll send you back to California. I didn't tell him that when I tried to sit with Kate and her friends at lunch, she said that junkyard kids couldn't sit at their table. The next day, Mrs. Peterson arrived in class with a basket full of small glass bottles. Today, she said, we are going to determine your tribes. She gave each of us a vial. That's a little glass bottle. Tip some of the liquid on your wrist. Smell. Some of you smell like lemons, some cinnamon, some almonds. Now, can you smell everyone who has the same scent as you? They will be part of your tribe for the year. I sniffed my own wrist. Vanilla. We all strolled around the classroom sniffing each other's wrist. I sniffed a boy's wrist who was wearing a homespun shirt, and he sniffed mine. Vanilla, we both said. My name's Gilbert McDonald. Call me Gibby. Then the two of us fanned out. I found a girl who smelled like vanilla. Looks like you're in my tribe, I chirped. She just smiled, but didn't answer me. Gibby came over with Tom. Vanilla, he announced. My bodyguard Jody is too. So, Tom, Gibby, Jody, and I were a tribe. I asked the shy girl her name. She wrote it down on a piece of paper. Ravanna Salvi. Tom told me later that she hadn't spoken as long as he knew her. From then on, whenever there was a project to be done, Mrs. Peterson had the tribes work together. Ravanna never taught, but she was a whiz at math. Gibby had tics and shouted for no reason sometimes. But his father was a professor of engineering, and Gibby loved to build things. Boy, was he smart. Jody loved reading everything, particularly poetry. He even wrote poems of his own. Tom made all of us laugh. He was so clever. Me, of course, I could draw. So I became the official journal keeper. The borders were filled with all my drawings. It wasn't long before Tom, Jody, Gibby, and Ravanna and I were best friends. We did almost everything together, even after school. We visited Jody, who lived on a farm east of town. His mother decorated cakes, and she was working on the tallest wedding cake I'd ever seen. We all helped her. One night, Gibby's dad set up a telescope in his back field and invited the whole class over to look. We could see Saturn with our naked eye, but with a telescope we could see Saturn's rings. We never did go to Ravanna's house. She lived in a foster home, and I don't think she was too happy there. But her foster mother let her paint beautiful designs on silk from an old World War II parachute which she brought to school to show us. My dad arranged for the whole class to go to the neighbor's farm and have a hayride that took us way off into the fields. Our class was special, all right. The Junkyard kids were pretty amazing to begin with, and Mrs. Peterson showed us how to shine. She even helped us make badges that said Junkyard Wonders. So you could be proud of who you are, she said. That day we got the badges. This mean kid came running up to us. Weirdos, retards, now you even have buttons that say dumbbell. A boy named Barton Poole grabbed the pin off my shirt. I started to cry, but then Tom and Gibby ran at Barton and his friends. Right, one of his friends said. Now Twinkle Toes and the jerk fool are going to hurt us. We are so scared. Just about then, Jody, big, wonderful Jody, appeared from nowhere. The mean boy sure backed off. Someday you aren't going to have this freak guarding you, Barton snarled at him as he stalked away. That day, Mrs. Peterson could see that we were badly shaken. Gibby finally spoke up. Mrs. Peterson, he said, we're all junkyard kids. Even though you try to make us feel better about it, we're throwaways, junk, and everyone knows it. Oh, my dear, that's where you are wrong, she said wistfully. Every one of you is wonder. Don't you realize what a junkyard really is? A place for things that nobody wants, Jody answered. No, it's a place full of wonderful possibilities. What some see as bent and broken throwaways are actually amazing things waiting to be made into something new, something unexpected, something surprising. We all looked puzzled. All right, class, get your coats. We are walking to Melvin Beach Junkyard right now, she exclaimed. And that's all for today. We'll continue the rest of the story next week. Thanks for listening.